between you and me, right where you are right in this moment, is exactly where you were meant to be.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome to the Jorgasmic Life Podcast. I am your hostess, Elena Harder, and I am so glad to have you here today. If you are an awakening woman, a conscious mother, a woman on a journey to bring about the best for your family and create an enlightened experience of being a child and a woman and a mother and partner in your world, I absolutely I'm so grateful and so glad that you have found your way here. This podcast collects not only my own personal stories, things I would have done better had I known better, but also the beautiful stories of many hundreds of other women and men who have been through the consciousness awakening journey, who are here to share their stories, to inspire you to know that you can recover from mental health challenges, from postpartum depression, from challenges with traumatic births, and just the life in 21st century, as well as beautiful, actionable tips, exercises where we walk you through practical things that have really helped us, and the journey of becoming a joygasmic mother, one who handles absolutely every challenge with grace and ease and understands that everything is here to awaken her deeper, to create more empowerment and more pleasure in her life, even the challenging things. So that sounds juicy. Listen up, because we have got a wonderful episode for you today.
Fully harnessing the joygasmic potential of your body and yourself. Anything is possible, and especially we are here to tell you that deep and fulfilling love is possible and is available for you when you choose that for yourself.
Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the Jorgasmic Life Podcast. Today's guest is today's episode is a collaboration with Waline, who I was interviewed on about a year and a half ago on his podcast, The Coyotes Path. And we just, it's a really beautiful exploration of relationship with nature, some ponderances from me about how living off grid and living out of van life for the last 2 years has been really kind of different lessons and different understandings than I thought. The power of time and how much time living on grid saves ourselves, the interesting situations that the current world situation has got us into, and our projections for whether or not the grid will crash and what might happen when that happens, from a pretty light perspective, not a doom and gloom perspective at all. And then also the journey of seeing our different generations awaken and what exactly is happening on Earth in terms of global awakening, in terms of understanding our trauma loads, our experiences, and how we can raise more awake, self-aware children. We cover that and a bunch more things in the episode. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to Ron, and I hope you really enjoy. Thank you so much.
I know I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
I'll be like, man, we just talked about some cool stuff and I forgot to record. Hit the record button.
But it starts automatically, but then I never know how long I'm going to be sitting here, and I don't want to forget.
Right.
On camera that I then have to edit out. So whatever. Anyway, we're moving from wild woods back into a town sort of situation. So I thought this is a really nice bookend, sort of to talk to you about the woods and sort of that journey with me, and then decisions we're making around it. So I'm like, it's good timing in terms of my life flow and
for sure,
lots of lessons learned, because we talked a year. And I've been in the woods for a year and a half since.
That's awesome.
Lots of different varieties. So along the way.
Very good. So tell me, I guess as far as living in the woods, last I knew you were living in a van and you were kind of adapting to van life and all that. And I assume you did that still, just more, within the woods type of scenario.
Yeah. So I think when we talked, I think I was in Michigan. So, I don't actually remember. Do you remember when it was? I don't remember, but I think it was
probably April.
Okay. Yeah.
2020.
Yeah, definitely in Michigan. So we just come back. The whole world had changed in terms of travel, and it was like,
Right, of
okay,
course.
but we were like based with family out of a family house on like an acreage, and yeah, we spent basically was like August. We decided, okay, like we want to go to Canada, so we've got to go through and bring our sort of bring all of our life. Dan had stuff in Seattle he had to collect, so we're like, okay, like we're not really sure if the roads are open. We don't know if the road stops are open. We don't know if we're gonna get stopped along the way. Like we're not
Right.
really, but we do know that the next step is to get, out west, close to BC, where we know we want to be, and we don't know how long it'll take us to get there, but we gotta move and do that next step. And so, yeah, it was like kind of a wild, I mean, that journey across the prairies is always an ordeal, no matter how long or slow you do it in. It's
Yeah, no
always like a
kidding.
lot of hours and a lot of
Wow.
it's incredibly beautiful terrain, and it really shows you like monoculture. You're like, wow, monoculture of corn is like a real thing across the
Yeah.
Dakotas, and sort of really putting into perspective.
Yeah, really.
Uh,
It's funny growing because I grew up in Iowa, so that's all I ever knew. And now, kind of,
yeah,
getting more into learning about the natural world and ecosystems and all that. It's amazing how these biological diversity deserts that we create with our monocrops. It's really a shame. And the thing that's most frustrating about it is that it's not necessary. Like, we can still grow plenty of food and have, islands of biodiversity within, these vast stretches of this monocrop or whatever. And I think we're starting to kind of get there. We're starting to learn a little more on how to do that more properly.
yeah.
But anyway, sorry, that was a little side thing.
Oh no, I mean, I brought it up because it's just like
Yeah,
looking at, sort of like hours and hours of corn, right? We're going
right.
120 kilometers an hour, like 70 miles an hour, whatever, and it's just like hours of it. You're like, holy shit, like
Yeah,
where's all this going? Like Aunt Jemima's and like cow feed, right? That's a huge
yeah.
chunk of okay. And then I've been doing more learning around glyphosate, like Roundup, one of the active
Mm,
ingredients of Roundup, and just like, whoa, like that's
yep.
causing a
Bad
lot of
stuff.
digestive stuff for people. And so, yeah, I got really passionate into that stuff. And it was really eye opening to see sort of those prairie provinces and what's happened, or states. I guess we were in the States. But just like to see it on that level and be like, okay, wow.
Yeah.
And there are definitely like permaculture people, like it's definitely possible to grow your own food. And I also realized over the last year, like that's not my journey. I would so much rather join like a CSA and support farmer. Like I am not the local farmer. We ended up on land here in Slocan, and they're like, let's grow a garden, let's be self-sufficient. I'm like, do you have any idea how much of the 7 acres we would have to convert to garden, and how much weeding we'd have to do, and how much
It is a
actually
lot of work, that's for sure.
growing potatoes for like my family's amount of potatoes we want to eat every day? Like that's a shit ton of potato plants. Like we fries, and so yeah, it's just like wow. And at the same time, like there's an incredible biodynamic organic farm 15 minutes down the road that has
Nice.
incredible produce prices, and I just literally go drive down there and be like, these are the best carrots ever, these are the best potatoes ever. And like that's their passion and their love, and it's totally like a family farm with a couple of like helpers. It's
That's
like
awesome.
if I can help them do their passion by like supporting them financially, and while doing like what I'm passionate about, support my family financially, like that's actually like more of the sort of circular economy we want to be creating.
Absolutely.
And gosh, this last year has just been such a lesson in how much I'm not really prepared to do all of it. Like, we lived out of the van. I think it would have been like June 2019 that Dan and Alex and I moved into the van together. And it's now September 2021.
Hmm.
So a little over 2 years that we've been like based out of the van. And in that time, like we hit probably like 16 states and two provinces, not so much travel in Canada once we got back here. And just like all over. And it's interesting because, when you've got a stable home base, you can trust that like you plug something into the wall and it works, and your water is going to run up, and the heat is going to be there, and we really, like, to a certain degree, people rely on that. And that's why people get kind of like freaked out about like, what if the grid shuts down? You go like, yeah, what if the grid, like, I remember I used to go down to Mexico 2012. Like, I was like, I'm going down to Mexico. Like, what if the world ends and it's winter in Canada and all this grid shuts down? Like, we're just effed. We're just like super effed because it's cold and nobody's got backup systems. Arizona's a little bit different because it doesn't really get to that like death killing cold.
Yeah.
But
we have a little more leeway.
It goes to the other end of the spectrum and it gets to that like deathly hot out, right? So we really are in a lot of ways dependent on that. And when I started this journey of going like, okay, I want to get off grid, I want to be more self-sufficient, F the system, F rent, get me like out of that kind of thing. It was very much from this sort of like Into the Wild. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
Yeah,
like,
I have.
Kind of thing. And I used to watch that movie when I couldn't travel, to like just be like, you might die if you go traveling, but then when I had wanderlust, I'd watch it to be like, oh yeah, like I want to go. It's got both sides, right?
Scratches both itches.
Yeah, depending on what you're looking for. But yeah, sort of thinking like, okay, like I can move into a van, I can be much more self-sufficient, I don't need all those walls and the power and all the electricity and all that stuff. And it turns out if you're working online, you still do need all those things. You still need water, you still need to figure out your heat. It's really easy to drive like 26 hours south to get the heat, but that 26 hours south is dependent on fossil fuels. Like, my car is not electric, it is not solar powered, it is not hydrogen powered. Even if it was, I wouldn't really understand how to do that or how to fix it or make it. And so, it's really interesting because I did really start on this journey to go like, I'm going to get more self-sufficient. And what I realized is like all of that self-sufficiency is still built on the existing system. Right. It's like, okay, solar panels, we need to get another solar panel. Where am I ordering that from? It's like the internet. Okay. Okay. So now we've got more solar gear, and like, yes, we're generating our own power, but if I don't rotate that solar panel midway through the afternoon to make sure it's getting the sunshine, like we're low on power. I made the mistake of being like, oh yeah, visiting friends from the city, like go ahead and use our power box to like blow up the air toys. They blowed up some like floaty things. Took us 2 weeks to recover the like 50% battery we'd lost.
Wow.
10 minutes of blow up, right? Like, it's just like, oh, like you really have to manage it. You got to pay attention, and you have to have the cash to buy the first place, right? So, and you've got to have access to the system. So it's been really interesting because at the same time as sort of realizing like even that independence from the system is still very reliant on the system. I've also encountered like my version being like, I still want to be plugged on the internet. I want to be podcasting. I want to do all these. But along the way, like I've met families and single people who are doing it more, like they take it one step further, right? We were sort of like, okay, well, like screw the house, we're gonna just be like out of the van and have a smaller version of home. But like everywhere we went, we were like on the graces of other people, and still going grocery shopping. And like it's just a matter of like which grocery store, not the grocery store. And it's like, well, that adds some like allure and interest and challenge. But I've also met people, there's a man that we met here in Slocan who did the winter in a hammock with a wood fire and a sleeping bag. And, it doesn't get so cold. It's like, let me do conversions. It's something like, it's like 5 to 10 below Celsius. So that's something like mid-20s, 15 Fahrenheit. Yeah. It's not so cold, but it's also really freaking cold, like it's cold. The water's freezing. You have to think and manage that. But he did, right? It's like, it's definitely possible. And he's a fit dude. He walks a lot. He's like, but he's also, when he shows up, he's like, hey guys, you got food? I'm happy to share potluck food, So like, as much as he's eating out of the forest a lot of the time, and he knows a lot about that forest eating, there's still a lot of appeal in sharing time and company with people.
For sure.
I had a girlfriend for about 2 weeks. She couldn't hack all the walking in the cold weather. Like my girlfriend anymore. So sad, and you're like, yeah, it takes like a very intense human being to
For
decide to
sure.
do, right? And I think there's another family who like has a converted bus. They live 6 kilometers up a very steep hill. They were walking in and out to get groceries for a long time.
Wow.
It's about 3 miles. So it's not such a long hike, but like a very long hike with a 3-year-old,
Yeah, no kidding. And
you
carrying
know?
all the groceries that you just bought, and yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And dog food for 2 very large dogs, you know?
right.
Like, but where's the dog food coming from?
Yeah,
Right? It's still coming from the store.
yeah,
And yeah, so it's really interesting because I kind of thought that in this journey I would find something and I go like, yeah, this is really sustainable. Like I'm back to the earth. I'm like back in that thing. And I've actually come to the place where I go like, gosh, the grid is so great. Good job. Like look at all our ancestors, all these systems that let us live so comfortably
yeah, yeah.
in
Yeah,
such
it's
ease.
interesting, and it gives you a new appreciation for what our ancestors had to do day in and day out to live, you know.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and I think we, in our culture and our society, we get into this mindset or idea, if you will, that uh, our ancestors were always just scraping by. And I think that's not necessarily true. I think we don't give them enough credit. I think they had, we have our systems today that we're used to and all that, but so did they.
Yeah.
They're just so much more different. They had systems, they had ways of doing things that were passed down, for tens of thousands of years to help them survive in certain areas. And sure, they had war, and famine was more prevalent and things like that. But I think the reality is that they they were able to live much more richly than we give them credit for, I believe.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
because yeah, I think we have this idea that we have reached the pinnacle, and
Mm,
maybe technologically, I think that is undoubtedly true, but there's a lot more to life than just technological achievement. And I think, and something that's interesting to me is that if you talk to like nutritionists and physiologists and people like this, and you've done a lot of research on nutrition and things like that, and our body has certain needs, nutrition needs. And it's so interesting to me that in this day and age, we're doing all these things, taking all these supplements, all this stuff to fuel or provide what's needed for our bodies, that our bodies obviously need. Well, we didn't just all of a sudden start needing that. Our bodies as human beings have always needed that nutrition. So that begs the question, how did our bodies get to be that way? Well, they got to be that way because we were getting that nutrition for such a
yeah.
long time, and we evolved to have and need that. And so, 10, 20, 30,000 years ago, we have this idea that all people are living like people that are living in third world countries in Africa today, and that's just not the case. They had what they needed
Mm,
when it comes to nutrition and things like that. They had to have, otherwise they wouldn't have survived and passed on their genes so that we could be here today, right?
exactly.
So I
Well,
think we have this idea,
there's no like living human remains in Antarctica as far as we can tell. Like
right?
they life, but everywhere else on the planet, like the things we need are there.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a certain amount of elaborateness in the simplicity that our ancestors uh, figured out how to survive, how to live, and not survive, how to live, just the way that we live right now,
Yeah.
just in a different setting and with different resources.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, traveling around the world, one of the things that I saw over time was like, oh, like every culture has its way of getting its food needs met. Every culture has its way of getting its moving around needs met, whether it's a tuk-tuk or a taxi or
Yep.
walking or bicycles or whatever. Like we've all got some way of getting around. There's families everywhere. They have ways of interacting and caring and culture that's been built up around that. Like we all have a lot of similarities, and a lot of that has been sort of moved into this like technological sort of Western society way in a lot of places, like over the last 30 years. Like it's just like boom, like this wave over the earth,
Right.
right? Some of those a lot of those traditional ways are sort of being lost in the ease of like current life. And but at the same time, like doing reading and research about the indigenous peoples on the west coast, for example, of Canada and like northern sort of Pacific Northwest, it's like the cedar tree, incredible. They would take the outer bark, make hats, clothing, like
Yeah.
it's
Waterproof clothing, even. That's how they
water.
dealt with the rain. Not waterproof, but water resistant.
Yeah, all of this stuff, roofs, whatever. And then they'd eat the inner bark, and the inner bark was like hugely nutritious. And you just go, oh my gosh, like there's no sense of like how many people live in this like fight or flight of like, can I pay my bills? Can I get my groceries met? Right. And it's like, how many freaking cedar trees are there? Like anybody who's been to those regions, like there is so many cedar trees. Less now we've got that right up the old growth and whatnot. But even with the logging that's happened, like so many trees, you just literally like walk over and go like, oh, there's a snack. Don't have to go to the fridge to find it. It's like, okay, maybe you got to like pull some bark off and stash it away for like later. But like eating bulrushes or like all the edible flowers that I've learned about, the edible flowers, plants, and go like, oh, and like nettles, it's an incredible food source. You know, I've been studying pregnancy and nutrition and go like, I wouldn't imagine nettles is such a big thing in Arizona because it's a wet food.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of it, but yeah, herbalists for sure, a nutritionist, you know, natural nutritionists for sure know about nettles and red raspberry leaf, you know, all the nutrition herbs for sure.
Yeah, and like wild spinach or lamb's quarter, stuff like that. And you're just like, they say you can't get these vitamins from plants, and it's like these plants are literally weeds. They were brought over to North America, or they were cultivated in North America because they were so nutritious. And we go like, oh, we should dig those out, or we should spray chemicals on them. And you go like, guys, like, come on. So I mean, it's been wonderful like getting to meet people who understand these things like yourself and like myself, and go like, oh, like there's so much available in the forest. There's so much that, you know, you really could just like wander through and gather the things you need. And when you're in the forest, like, I don't know, I so much of like, I've done some fasting in the past and really realized like how much of my eating was like coping. How much of my eating was like boredom coping, stress coping, like, oh, I should be eating because my mom's making a meal and I'm hanging out with her, kind of, you know, like I'm not actually hungry. And so, you know, when our nutritional needs are getting met because we've got nutrient dense food, then, you know, we're not as hungry, especially if you get off of that like sugar cycle or the carb cycle of the refined carbs or the addictive food chemical cycle, you know,
all the empty calories, all that stuff. Yeah.
And I mean, our generation's not dealing with famine, they're dealing with malnutrition.
Yeah.
You know?
And exactly. And goes back to my point earlier that, you know, when you look at the content of our food today compared to wild foods, I mean, we domesticated these plants, all these fruits and vegetables and stuff that we eat, and they're great and they're good for us. But if you compare the nutrient content of a modern day spinach compared to wild spinach, you know, like goosefoot or something like that, or nettles or something like that, the wild food has 4, 5, 6 times more nutrients, vitamins, and minerals than our stuff at the grocery store does, you know. And so because we've selected for taste and appearance and all these other things, you know, we weren't selecting for nutrient density. We're selecting for what tastes good and you know, and bigger yields and things like that. And as we've done that, we've reduced the nutrient content of our food. And that's why also, and I think that's kind of what created this scenario that you're talking about, where we just eat because it's there a lot of times, you know, whereas if you actually were to live on a wild foods diet, you would be amazed at how full you get and how much your needs are met by a comparatively small amount of food, right? And also how important fat is in a wild foods diet, because fat is gold in the wild because it's not in everything, right? In fact, it's pretty rare. And so traditional cultures highly valued fat, right?
Yeah.
All over the world, fat and sugar, and
Yeah.
And today those are the things that the doctors say not to eat for us, but it's because our palate, because evolutionarily speaking, our palate evolved to really want those things because they were so rare in the wild. But now we've created a scenario where they're all around us, so easy to get, and we're overdoing it, right? And we've flipped it, right? We're going after the carbs and the fat and the sugar, and we're losing out on the nutrients. And so we've completely flipped our food cycle, or our food availability. And as we can see, there's just an epidemic of all kinds of health issues because of that. That of course are well aware of. So it's just really interesting. But yeah, I think I don't endorse any one particular diet or whatever, but like you look at diets like the paleo diet, the Mediterranean diet, these ones that are kind of getting back more to what we used to eat, as our ancestors ate. And there's definitely something to that approach, to going that direction, so
yeah, I mean, and the thing that a lot of those diets, like whether it's paleo, keto, like whole foods, plant-based, whatever, like people get to choose what they want to eat. That's their choices. I'm not here to tell anybody what they want to eat. What works for me, I know definitely know what doesn't work for me, right? But a lot, like the thing they have in common is like vegetables, whole foods, right? Less processed. If people are doing grains on any of those diets, it's like soaking the grains, soaking the nuts, like making sure we're preparing them properly. And there's a huge challenge around not preparing those things properly. And like, oh my gosh, like ferments, like ferments were a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
Right? When they discovered salt, they were like, oh my God, this stuff is brilliant. Like civilization from that point forward, because they went, wow, now we can salt fish and meat, and we can salt our veggies and put them in brine, and then they'll be, they'll stay. And I mean, we lived without refrigeration since we moved in here in the spring. So like since April, we didn't have a fridge. We just had a cooler. I kept it in the shade, close it at night, sort of hold it or open it in the evening when it gets cold. So it sort of like catches that cold air, close it at night, leave it closed as much as possible, leave it in the shade.
Right.
And I grew up in like a normal house. Like I grew up with like a very conventional normal house. My brain has been like absolutely like shattered in this last year. And we don't eat, so that makes a big difference in terms of the refrigeration, right? And we're not doing dairy, so that makes a big difference. Like those things like really actually kind of generally do need to be either eaten very fresh or put in the fridge. But the plant-based stuff, it's like it actually just works. Like I can leave a zucchini in the bottom of my cooler for a week, 2 weeks. It's better on the vine, leave it on the vine, let it keep growing. But if I've purchased it or if I've pulled it in from the garden, like it'll keep without refrigeration.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, and yeah, and then the salt, the salt preservation. So like kraut, I've been making kraut this whole year.
Nice.
And stable at 37 degrees like Celsius, which is like 100 and something Fahrenheit, like super hot out.
Yeah.
I had a 4-week heat wave, and I was just like, oh, my ferments, I don't know, are they going to be okay? Like they should really be in a cold cellar. And it's like they changed taste a little bit. I had one batch that like that didn't go so well, but I was also I experimented. I added some kale. I was like, oh, we could do like cabbage and kale. That's probably like even better for us. I wasn't into it. It didn't work for us, but the jars that I had that were just cabbage, that were like, my normal recipe, like they were fine.
That's awesome.
They were fine temperature. They're fine at like, close to freezing temperatures. It doesn't, as long as it doesn't freeze,
Mm-hmm.
they're cooking around that. And it's like, like this is a valid food technology that could help us, beyond, and also is like integral to like human culture.
Absolutely.
In terms of, and the world has fermented foods, and studying that more as well. There's this piece where the like literally the culture, like the microbiome, the biome of those fermented foods, literally, if everybody's eating them, gives them this like shared biological like microbiome culture as well. And you're like,
That's cool.
got grandma's hands in it, like
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Interesting.
gonna squish it, and thinking like, how much are we lacking that in current society? I mean, the nuclear, I could go on and on and on about the nuclear and the challenges of that, but
yeah, we
even
weren't made as humans to raise kids in that type of environment, in the type of environment that we've chosen in modern Western society. That's for sure.
no, and at the same time, like, we can, like, if I this last year is like, wow, we can be radically adaptable. Like, I met a mom the other day, single mom. She's living out of like an SUV with 2 kids.
Oh wow.
Right, 5 and a 3-year-old, and you're just like, whoa, I didn't even know people did that. Like, wow, how's that going? Like, stuff. Do you have stuff? Like, it's like, no, like everything fits in the back of the van, and they put the seats down and the mattress down for like bedtime. They're like, oh dude, like, that's intense, right? And that's her version. There's also people who like I've seen videos from India where like there's whole towns that live in garbage dumps.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Is based around that, and like my Western brain is like, like, does not. The closest I can get is like living out of a van. That's the closest my brain will like let me sort of like venture into that world.
Right.
But like, we're wildly adaptable as humans.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. And we hear a lot about, especially this day and age, about these end of time scenarios, where the whole grid goes down, all this stuff, all this stuff's going to happen, and whether it does or not, we're definitely at a point where things could for sure spiral very quickly, and a lot of people, because I'm a little bit not connected to, but I keep kind of one ear on the whole like kind of prepper movement thing, and this idea of gathering all this stuff, all this food and weapons and ammunition, and that's all great. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's this idea, and I think it's fueled by Hollywood and all these stories and whatnot, that when everything collapses, people are going to be at each other's throats. And I think obviously there will be some of that, because people are still people, and people that are like that today in their everyday life, they're going to be like that then too. But I think if you look at where a lot of things have happened in places, and I think it has a lot to do with the culture too. Sorry, I'm like meandering here, but yeah. I think we will be pleasantly surprised to see, just like what you just said, how adaptable humans are, and how, when it really comes down to it, we can and we'll find it in our best interest to come together. And instead of, I've got what's mine, I'm going to keep you out, I think we'll see a lot more communal sharing and helping, and whether it's with skills or knowledge or foodstuffs or whatever it is, I think we'll see a lot more of that than Hollywood would lead us to believe. I think I lost you, Elena. If you can hear me, I can't hear you. You're back.
That was my fault. I forgot to plug my power management issues.
Case in point. I stayed in, so I think the recording should still be stable and good. Great. So anyways, but yeah, I think we'll see a lot more people helping each other than Hollywood would lead us to believe there will be. if and when those kinds of things happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also don't think the grid will like intentionally go down. This is like my personal theory is like
Right.
money invested in that. The people who have that money are not invested in killing off a bunch of people all at once. They're invested
Right.
in making the people suffering and like profiting off of that. So, I mean, it's a bit like doom and gloom, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, great. Like that means that I can feel more secure about that it's not all going to shut off. And I also like doing some reading about like peak oil. And you go like, there was peak whale oil before there was peak like crude oil. You know, like they like all the whales in the oceans became lamp fuel and
Yeah.
car fuel at some point in the past. And now we have like, you know, much less whales, but we also managed that transition as a society from one fuel source to another fuel source. There's no reason to think that, you know, with the history of humanity that we wouldn't continue to move forward. The question is it going to be in the same format as right now?
Right.
Will we from the mistakes we've made in terms of like extraction in the extreme and like not really paying attention to that? There's something like 300,000 babies born every day. I looked it up like day before, and you're just like, holy shit, that's a lot of people. And like 70 million per year.
Wow.
Like that's a lot of babies.
Yeah.
That's just the baby year.
Yeah,
like
we're getting to this point where, I mean, I don't know what the carrying capacity of the earth is. I don't know how sustainable all this is, but I know that there's a peak, you know, to where, because we see it with populations in the wild, you know, of wild animals and things, and the ecosystem can only support so much, and we have so artificially altered our ecosystem to support us, and we've so altered so many things, that, you know, we're starting to see obviously the ills that's putting on the earth, on our ecosystems, and the impact we're having. I mean, there's a reason that this era of time is called the Anthropocene, right? It's because we have so altered things. And, you know, I'm not so much concerned about the earth's long-term fate. Like, you know, I'm a believer that the earth is its own entity, it's its own being, right? And just like, you know, we have bacteria on us, we are the bacteria of the earth, if you will. You know, there's some that are good and there's some that are not good, and you know, you could take that analogy further if you want, but I think in the end the earth's going to take care of itself. I think the big question is are we going to continue to be a part of that story or not? And you know, are we going to be good stewards? Are we going to be, you know, if you look at the cosmology and the legends and myths and beliefs of just about every traditional culture out there, you know, each entity on this earth has its job, has its role, has its niche, the thing that it does, right? And the vast majority of indigenous cultures believe that human beings' role, job, niche is to be stewards and caretakers of the places they live. That's our role. That's what we do. That's who we are, right? And if you have a cross-cultural pan-human belief that spans all cultures that that don't have contact with each other throughout history, that kind of says something about, you know, the essence of who we are as a people, as a species, as beings on this earth. And I think, you know, in today's day and age, we've really forgotten that. It's turned into how can I get mine? You know, how can I take care of myself? How can I continue to fuel whatever it is that I'm trying to fuel, you know, because of something that I feel is missing inside, you know? And in the past, we had community, we had shamans, we had, you know, all these different things that helped us to deal with those while we focused on what was important, which was honoring the ancestors and providing a future for future generations in taking care of the earth and taking care of things where we are. And we don't have that. We don't have that anymore, right?
It's back some places with some people, right? Like
exactly. And that's the great, you know, the awesome thing about that is we're starting to to look back and say, hey, maybe we kind of messed up, have you ever seen that? It's a graphic of like, the evolution of man. And then at the end, there's like a guy, he turned around, he said, go back, we've messed it all up. And I think there's some truth to that, and that's not to, we are where we are. We can't just discard everything, and we shouldn't, there has been some really amazing and wonderful advances, if you want to call them that, or things that we've learned and understand about the nature of the universe from a materialistic science perspective. But to discard all the other knowledge that we have as human beings, that doesn't fit within that materialistic, mechanistic, scientific mode, that's what's got us in trouble. And I think I think we're starting to realize that, and the farther science goes, the more they're starting to realize that it agrees with the things we've already known as a species that didn't come from that materialistic scientific view. And it's very interesting to see it kind of start to come full circle, and we're starting to realize more. And I think that's why we're getting, people that are within, people such as you and I that are within this society and culture. We're starting to get that again, to realize that, hey, there's some knowledge back there that we needed, and that we need today, because it's knowledge that was endemic to human beings, to living the best life in community with ourselves, with others, with the earth, with everything that we could. And that's why there's a lot of this turmoil in the world, is because we don't have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it can feel really challenging to think about, the wisdom that's been lost, or the wisdom that has been, that humanity once had, that's been either intentionally or unintentionally forgotten. And at the same time, I think there's lots of really beautiful examples. Like this last year, I've been studying like yoni steaming, vaginal steaming, which is practiced in every continent, over 40 around the world. It's like massively like a worldwide practice, especially for postpartum healing. And it's incredibly effective at, making organs go back, making the hemorrhoids disappear, like all of these things.
Right.
That really, really supportive of. And you go like, that's, a common practice across the whole globe. There's probably a reason for that. And, one woman has like taken the charge and been like, we're going to teach this to the women again, and I'm one of like hundreds of women who have gone like, we're clearly missing something. Please, like, teach us. That's one example. Another beautiful example is like abdominal massage therapy. So I encountered this like Arvigo therapy, which comes from Rosia. I don't actually remember. I've just started it, but the story is just like, I love it. So she was 44 when in the 80s, when she went like F society, I'm going to Belize with her partner, and they were like, we're going back to the jungle, like we're going to live with nature, right? And they were about 2 years in, and had just like, they'd spent all their savings. The jungle had just like, there's like wildcats and like mosquitoes and like torrential rains. Like Belize is like, beautiful in the winter months and like kind of hellish in the summer in a different way.
Right.
Because it's just really hot. And obviously the local people had figured out how to live there, but they were doing it sort of in their own way and from scratch, and not necessarily with a lot of help from community. She was ready to throw in the towel. And all of a sudden, this 89-year-old man who was a medicine man, traditional medicine man, showed up, started asking her about herbs and plants, because she had come down to share naturopathic medicine with the local people there. And it took a couple years, but within a year or two, he agreed, okay, I'll train you in the things that I know. And she literally spent he lived to be 103. So she spent the next 14 years studying, learning everything from him. And he said, I'll teach you as long as you stay after I die and take care of my people, like the way I have been taking care of them, which sometimes meant people were calling him names in the street, like you stupid witch, or, you like crazy shaman or whatever. Like sometimes he was not in good repute,
right.
But when sick, they would show up at his doorstep, right? 1 week they'd call him a name. The next week they'd show up at his doorstep being like, please heal my child or whatever. Right. And she is, she took his work, she learned it she dedicated her life to it, learned it, has taught hundreds of practitioners locally in these traditional Mayan techniques, and has also taught internationally online. Like I took a class from a lady who's in Thailand, who studied with this woman originally way back in like Belize, way back. And you like, whoa, like, and there's literally hundreds of women, mostly women, probably there's some men in there, but I think a lot of women who are like, we got to bring these roots back. Right. Thank you for on that journey. Like, we're so grateful to you. But like a bunch of people who have been like, okay, there's hundreds of practitioners who are now trained in these like ancient modalities because of two people who were like, we're going to do this and we're going to commit doing it. And I think we're in a place, you and me and like people who are listening to this and all those in the Rainbow Tribe, the Rainbow Warriors, like light workers, however you want to, eco resiliency, like back to the land people, however
people, your Shambhala warriors, whatever you want.
All of those names, right? Like we're in a place where we go like, we came to earth to like preserve these ancient knowledges, pass them on to future generations, reconnect with like how important it is to remember our ancestors and their lessons, and to think 3 to 7 generations forward and go like, how is this going to impact my children? We're now in the process of going like, where is the land we can steward? It's not time to keep vanning around. Like, I can't even cross the border. I could, maybe, I don't know. It's like so many hoops I don't want to jump through to cross the border. Let's say that. And so we go like, okay, well, it's really time to be local, and it's time to deepen into that stewarding. I can't steward the earth if I'm driving around all over the place, spending fossil fuel to get from here to there, like to handle my whims of like, I don't want to do winter. That's a very like prestigious, very like privileged situation that I was in, and I fully recognize that. And it took me maybe a decade to realize like the full privilege of that situation that I was.
We all have a lot of privilege in the United States and Canada.
It's its whole own journey.
It is
a place of like land for our family, and we go like 5 acres. I go, if I'm thinking 3 to 7 generations forward, 5 acres is not enough to create space. All of those great grandchildren that I want to meet one day, it's like, okay, so then we got to think bigger and really start thinking like, okay, does that look like the land we're on right now? Like, it's super beautiful, but the next solution is like bring in an excavator and like all the trees down to make RV spots. And I go like, like I feel bad about like all the paths we've made from walking. I go like, we trampled like 2 feet wide of like all of these beautiful forest floor that was already there. Like, how can we do it in a way where we're really respecting nature? Yes, we need places to walk. Good to choose the same places to walk over and over again. Good to choose those places wisely and tread lightly. How do you make paths for barefoot walking versus like shoed walking? Oh my gosh, that was a huge lesson from this summer.
Nice.
Because I mean, I could show you my feet, but I don't really want to. like pock marks, like all over from the pine needles and the sharp branches and all of this stuff. And I go like, I want to touch the earth. I want to feel the earth. And like, I think every day somebody in my family goes like, ow, ooh, it's become normal to go like, oh, probably they just stepped on something sharp. Like, you gotta holler because it really hurt. Also, like the foot is smart enough to go like, oh, that's sharp, and just like,
exactly.
And just keep walking forward. And then there's an art to like making paths for barefoot walking, and it doesn't involve weed whackers or axes or anything like that. It involves like getting under the ground and really like trimming those plants out from underneath the ground so that they're not spiking up, and you don't have 2-inch tall like cut off things those are really that is like the worst thing to put on a path. It hurts so bad. No. So it's like, but if we're not walking barefoot, like it's so easy to just like blop, blop, blop and like tromp all over whatever's going on. You're not going to pay attention in the same way. So it's like, how can we walk barefoot in our thinking? How can we walk into this transformation and not do what I've done over the last 2 years, which is like, I can just buy my to be an independent from the system. And it's like, still really stuck in a commercialist mindset, Elena. Like, gotta learn some skills. Like, need to choose a place so I can start building community so that when shit hits the fan, it's not like, hi neighbor I've never met before. It's like, my neighbor who I've like exchanged childcare with and am friends with and have invited over to sauna and like all of these things. It's
For
like,
sure.
that like people take that for granted if they've been sitting still, that they at least have like waved at their neighbors. I don't even know what that looks like. I've been moving too much for too long.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting conversation that this society has created, this idea of individualism and being so on our own and in our own worlds and not having true community. I mean, what we call communities today are not really communities. John Young calls them, what does he call them? Co-located groups of people, but they're not true communities.
Yep.
And what's so interesting about that is that I believe it's within all of us as people that we yearn for those communities.
Yeah.
But we've just, it's become so easy to not put ourselves out there to create them, because we have most of the things for survival. Our needs are met in that regard. And the corporations are good at creating a problem and then selling us a solution to the point where we think that we don't need communities. I don't need to barter exchange with a neighbor because I could 2 clicks on Amazon and I got what I need at my door, or whatever. And these are all great solutions that have done good things in many ways, but we've really, really lost what it means to be true community. To have. And I was having this conversation with my 17-year-old daughter the other day. And I was just telling her, I'm sorry, baby. Like, it's hard being a parent today. I said, back in the day, you look at traditional communities and in many cases, the parents don't discipline the children. That's not their role. That's not their job. That's the job of the aunties and the uncles, and to dispense the discipline and to teach them the right way. And the job of the parents is just to love them, but we're in a situation with this idea of the nuclear family that, unless you have very close extended family around you and are spending a lot of time with them, and even in that case, we as the parents are so conflicted because we would love nothing more than to just love our children. But we also have to be the disciplinarians, because if we don't do it, no one's going to, right? Because we don't have those aunties and uncles in that wider community to do that for us. And I just told her, I'm sorry. Like, I want you to know, first and foremost, we love you. But we also have to set boundaries and rules and enforce them. And we don't like doing that any more than you like it. But if, to be good parents with what we've been given in this day and age, that we're doing the best we can with that, and she understood that and got that. It's, it didn't make it better that we were dispensing of discipline, but, it is, and that's the quandary. And it's the same with my boys, they're 12 and 10. And that's the same quandary that we're all in, and we just want to love them. But we're in this situation where we can't just love our kids, or it's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, and you look at the like sort of that model of traditional culture, or like it's still practiced pretty widely in Asia, which is like the young and the old are together.
Yeah.
Right? And parents watch the children, and the young people who have the young to middle-aged people who have the energy and the oomph, like they're the ones toiling in the field, bringing the food in, doing the work during the day, whatever that might be. And the old and the young understand each other. They're both close to, the in-between. They're both close to history of what life might really be. And they get it, and it's maybe like those middle years where we become adults, where we sort of like, I'm like rough and tumble with like whatever our particular karmas, our particular like life journeys are. And, with like families relocating every 5 years and people living on the other side of the country and travel being what it is. And like, it's hard. And then also like the trauma load, trauma load.
It's daily.
And so, it's beautiful. Like my mom came to me this last time we visited her, and she said, I was listening to some stuff from Gabor Mate, and he said that we're probably at least 3 generations down the line from knowing what like healthy humans are that aren't traumatized. And I went, 3? Try thousands. Like try thousands generations. Like, how do you think we got here? I mean, some depends on the family, right? Some families are on sort of like healing trajectory, and some families are just like, F it, and we're going to be like harsh to each other, depending on where you're at in that situation. Like, everybody's on their own journey, and like compassion and love to those who are on sort of like a downward trajectory or like a roller coaster trajectory. Right. Not like my family doesn't have its moments too, but
of course we all do.
You know, like in general, like we are working to be compassionately communicating with each other to understand how we got to where we're at, and talking about like the stories that I know from my grandparents, and they're like, wow, mom, that must have been really challenging to be raised in that kind of environment. Like, I totally understand like why you were the way you were with me, you know, and I understand like you were in chat, like poverty was an issue when I was young and you guys were working, and that's probably why I have walked around my life feeling like I'm not loved, you know. And it's like, you know, like to be able to talk those things through and move it through, like that's a big deal. But you know, she was talking about this idea that we're at least 3 generations away from really actually knowing what happy, well-adjusted humans look like. And I remember going to Bali, and Bali's a beautiful example because Bali has had 600 years with no war, no famine, no violent takeovers. And when you look at the culture there, they have such a connect, like they have these family compounds. So like a fenced sort of area, keep the jaguars or whatever out, with these big walls. And inside that you'll have, you know, one main house and several smaller houses. And it's like the main house belongs to whoever's the matriarch, patriarch of the family. And the other houses are aunties and uncles and younger people. And they just pass it around and through, right? And there was a single mom who I hired to help me with childcare stuff. She didn't have half the challenges I had in terms of the identity of being a single mom. She was living with her parents. It wasn't an issue. It was just what you did if you were a single parent. Right. You know, her mom, dad, aunts, uncles all lived within 2 minutes of her. Sure, that probably came with some challenges too, you know, but it was very much this culture of like, we'll help each other. Like if your son needs a ride to school, we'll take him. You go do the work. You know, she was the one who was doing the work. Everybody else kind of hung out at home. And what did they do? Her brother was a sculptor. He literally spent his whole day doing these incredible like stone sculptures where he'd take a slab of rock and put these like sacred, Hindu images into them. And you know, when you go to Bali, if anybody's ever been, or if they're lucky enough to get to do that in the future, you see like the art and the music and the dance and the worship, like 5 times a day they're offering prayers. Who has time in modern society to offer prayers 5 times a day? Who's making that a point? And it's like, right. Well, you know, we've been raised and indoctrinated to think that we don't have time for that it's not important.
Go,
right? But in a place where, you know, food is plentiful, they're living on a volcano, so it's volcanic soil. It's really easy to grow in, right? You're not dealing with erosion or water erosion or whatever, deforestation. I mean, they have issues there too, but like, you know, like everywhere's dealing with that stuff, but in their own way. But they're in this place where the focus has been on arts, culture, community, prayer, devotion. You go like, oh, like that's what humans will get into and spend more and more of their time with if they're not so focused on surviving. And I love having been there for the months that we were there and getting to live in that, because I go, okay, I do have a model for what humanity might be like.
That's amazing.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous to see that. And you can see the difference between something like Bali and something like Cambodia, where, you know, the Khmer Rouge came through in the 80s, 90s. I can't remember the year exactly. And just like obliterated the population, just like killed off all the like educated people, all the artists, all the like poets, you know, anybody who had like creative flair, just like gone. Goodness. Cambodian are beautiful, but the arts and culture that isn't there. It's radically different. And yeah, go like, okay, so if we can manage to not do war, if we could manage to, work together, there really is a very different, beautiful version of humanity that's possible.
Yes, I long for that. And I think, in my own way, and you obviously in your own way, I think that that's our life mission and goal, is to bring that about, or to support or, influence the world in that way in some shape or form, and with whatever gifts that we have. And yeah, I've had this developing theory just based on what I've seen, and I wondered it. I want to hear your opinion of it, if you're seeing the same thing. But I feel like we're starting to get to a place in our culture where I do see that trajectory that you're talking about, a few generations, several generations away from seeing that. And what I have seen is, I feel like, so I'm in my late 30s. I assume we're of kind of the same generation. And what I think I'm seeing is that our parents' generation, the baby boomers, are just now starting to realize and kind of take a look at their own trauma and what they've been through. And of course, this is a very generalized view of what I'm seeing, and this is just from my perspective. And I feel like, so they're starting to kind of become more aware and wake up to that. And I feel like our generation, my wife and I, and you, and a lot of the associates that we have and have seen, are doing the same thing, but we're doing it at this time in our life instead of later in our life.
Yeah.
And in our mid 30s and or 40s, whatever, that midlife time. And at the same time, I know for us, and I see it with many of our associates as well, we're making these things aware to our own children and trying to give them tools so that they can do it even earlier in life, right? Maybe hopefully their early 20s or whatever, and not that anyone's ever going to be perfect, but at least be able to recognize and understand and start beginning to work with that trauma, that we all have at some point to some degree in childhood. And I feel like everyone's kind of doing it at the same time, but at different generational levels. Do you see that too?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I look at it as sort of like a wave of consciousness coming from galactic through the earth, and it's like, don't have a choice. You talk about like the Kali Yuga moving into like this golden age, and it's like, well, in order to do that, we got to let go all the detritus, we got to let go all the pain. And I mean, I remember even 10 years ago being like studying breath work and going to all these like personal development workshops. And there were a lot of people in their 60s there. There were some people in their 30s. And every once in a while, you'd find somebody who was like 18, 19. And you go like, what are you doing here? And they go like, I just love this stuff. My mom's been into it my whole life.
That's awesome.
And like, vibrancy and this glow and this just like aliveness. You go like, something going on there. Like, is working, like whatever you're into that caused you to be like that, like you're I mean, obviously, like life takes its time. It takes its time and it takes its toll. And those who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, like we didn't have to go through war the way they went through war.
Absolutely. Yep.
Go through that the terror of that. We've got our own challenges with like COVID and
Cell
like
phones.
all that. Cell phones. All that. We're working with that. But I think it's really different than sort of having like a whole generation of humans like plucked up and not come back.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And I see it as sort of like generation by generation, we're progressively working through those trauma loads. So if World War I and World War II, and then, the stuff that happened in the 70s, sort of early 80s, and, there's still wars being fought in the world. Don't get me wrong. Of
course.
Still stuff. But those really big ones, if that was the whole world processing the pain and the loss of all, the 7 generations before them that had, just been absolutely devastated by like the Roman Empire and the Crusades and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like, okay, right. What if that was us like shaking that through the collective psyche? And now we're shaking through like control and like over domineering, like king-based feudal systems. We're like shaking that through, or like tyranny. We're shaking tyranny, the collective psyche, and going through a collective dark night of the soul around that. My personal opinions, everybody gets to make their own opinions about what's happening right now, obviously. But if we're shaking that through, it's like, oh, and there's always people who are at the leading edge of that, right? There's a whole group of people that I've talked to who they started having this sort of awareness and this understanding about 2009, 2012. They're going like, huh? What's going on? And this new level of self-awareness rises, and a whole bunch of people go, whoa. And there's a very psychic friend of mine, Paula Hopwood, who I interviewed on the podcast actually. And she says, a couple years ago, I got this really loud hit that like March, April 2020, like a whole bunch of people were going to wake up.
Dang.
Go like, what better way to wake up than to just like have your life like smacked around a bit and go like,
totally.
oh, I got right. Those 60, 70-year-olds, they're hitting health crises from eating crap food from the, standard American diet for the last 60 years. You either wake up and find a better solution, or you just keep what you're doing and you die.
Exactly.
I mean, gray area in between there, but this is like kind of
of course
version, right? And people hit those crises at all sorts of times. Like I hit my crisis after my son was born. It catalyzed me to go, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be some other solutions out there. Everybody goes through that at their own time, but I think you're absolutely right. It's like there is something bigger happening on the earth in terms of that wake up, and we can absolutely support our children as adults who have learned some tools, who are in that process, who are understanding what's going on. The stuff that comes out of my son's mouth, I go like, you've been listening. I have absolutely shaped and formed your worldview about what's going on. And now I'm having to go backtrack a little bit and be like, let's not poo-poo like society quite so much. Like I've done that for the last like 5 years, but let's come back to something maybe a little more middle path, a little more Buddhist. That, like we're all on our own journey. Everybody deserves compassion, even those who are like oppressing and being in challenge. I'm having to backtrack a little bit there.
Right.
To be like, hey, I made a mistake. I was maybe judgmental. I'm super Virgo. It's hard for me not to be judgmental. And to give that wisdom to our kids and I mean, my son and I were talking the other day, because we're talking about birth and babies a lot. I've been all in this like birth.
Remind me, how old is Alex?
He's 10, almost 11.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've been talking recently about birth stuff, and I go, well, if you want to be there at your like little baby's brother or sister's birth, like we've got to make sure that we work through your birth trauma. I've got to work through it. You've got to work through it, because that's how we create like a really beautiful, happy birth space. He goes like, I have birth trauma. And we go like, well, let's think about all the things that didn't quite go the way that your mom would have wanted, that are like maybe less than ideal, and how that might have impacted the fact that you walk around being like, Mom, do you love me? I go like, how many times a day do I tell you I love you? Lots. Like spend my whole life like dedicated around making sure your world works. Love you, and sort of going like, oh, but that has deeper roots. And he's old enough now, like he's in that 10, 11 zone. I go like, okay, he's starting to be able to think about that cognitively, to be able to sort of separate himself from his past self, from his future self, and start to do that inner digging work. And I go, thank God, I've been waiting years to be able to talk with him about this on that level.
Right.
So when they're 7, 8, like they're still in like dream theta land, right? They're just still picking up information, synthesizing and exploring it. And gosh, if I can prep him by the time he's 14 to have resolved anything that happened between 0 and 7, then he's like ready to step into like manhood at 14,
right.
Ready to be like a leader and somebody who doesn't have to spend the next 14 years after that till they're like 28, like trying to figure out why I'm so messed up, or longer for a lot of people.
Totally. No, we've had the same experience with our 17-year-old daughter. The things that she says and understands and knows, that my wife and I, we just look at ourselves and we're like, man, if we had that knowledge at that age, we'd be in a whole different spot right now, and so it's really, really nice to see. And as our boys get older, I'm sure we'll see more of that too. But our kids are so much better than we were, and that's very, very refreshing and glad to know that they're so much better equipped than we were.
That's the journey. Like that's what we have to offer.
Yeah.
And huge part of why I offer the podcast, because I go like, we have the capacity, like in the same way that our parents stopped physical abuse in the school system, stopped physical abuse at home. I mean, not everybody was blessed to be raised in that kind of family environment like I was. I was like super grateful, but like that was a daily struggle for my dad to not beat the crap out of us because of what had happened to him.
Right.
You know, like every time he got pissed off, he just like, my wife's gonna divorce me if I do what my dad did, you know, like it just sort of hold like white knuckles. Whereas for me, it's like, oh, like I don't have to work it that hard because I was raised in a loving home. Okay, what can I work on then? Let's work on like compassion for all people. Let's work on creating, you know, enlightened family, like calling in children that are like bodhisattvas, like here to just like serve humanity in the enlightenment of humanity, and like call in these like starseed babies who want to like, you know, like who are rainbow tribe or all those other terms we used earlier.
Right.
Call those children in and be like, we're ready. We're here to support you. We're here to give you like non-traumatic births, non-traumatic lives, like love environments so that you can just
help bring about that golden age.
Straight up. And I really feel like, I mean, I feel so blessed to be here in this time, in this space. I don't know how many times I'm like, glad I wasn't born in the 60s. Like, blood.
Right.
You know? Like, super, super grateful. What kind of stuff is your daughter saying? I'm just curious.
Just how, like, she's just so insightful with herself. Like, I think I do this because of this, you know, and things like that. And I'm like, I wasn't thinking anything like that when I was 17. I was like, where's the next party or whatever, you know, like just trying to, you know, have fun. And don't get me wrong, she has her share of fun and is very focused on that as well, because that's that time of life. But she's very insightful about herself, you know, why she, you know, thinks or does things the way she does, or why certain relationships that she's had maybe turned out the way they did, for good or ill. Just very a lot more self-aware than we were, for sure. And I'm starting to see that in my boys too, as they're getting older, you know, and just being self-aware. I think that's for me, and for what my wife and I see, just the overall message is that they're a lot more self-aware than we were. They're not so wrapped up in themselves that they can't see outside of themselves, which I think we were more like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm definitely still on that journey of going like, oh, there's other people.
Right. Yeah, we all are to a certain degree.
Like becoming a parent is super helpful in that too. Like,
for sure.
We were at a potluck a couple nights ago, and it's a mixed group. There's like 2 single moms, myself and my partner and our kid, and then like a bunch of single people who are in their like mid-20s to 30s. And, you know, there's a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and 6-year-old running around. There's a fire, there's some dogs, there's like, it's getting dark, all this stuff, right? And the 2 moms and me and my partner are just sort of like the only thing we're there to do is like watch the kids and make sure they're safe. Yeah. Everybody else table like blah 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 blah. They're like, door, can we go inside? Can we go inside? Bam, 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 bam. Like for like maybe 2 minutes for the single like non-child having humans to realize that like the kids were asking for something. Meanwhile, I'm like, do I like yell at the people who are at the table and like knock at the door? Do I get up? I don't know. Side right now, like, do I just holler across the place? But I'm going through this like whole process of thinking like, how do I handle this before the people, you know, without kids are even thinking about it. And it's like literally something that changes in our brain chemistry, where we go, we need to be concerned about other people and other people's children. And yeah, it's a big transition.
Yeah, really is.
Yeah. So much good stuff.
Yes. Yeah, it's a cool journey. It's a cool journey to be on.
What have you been doing to get your family out into nature, you know, with all this last year being what it's been?
Yeah, so that's been a real tough one for me. I've been working on finishing up my master's degree, and so a lot of my time's been going to that. So you know, we're very fortunate. We live in a really beautiful suburb of Phoenix that has some, you know, nature spaces pretty close to us. We got you know, I can look out my window and see our community pond there and that kind of stuff. So, you know, we go fishing in the pond and we do walks, at least a couple times a week. For me, I go daily, but trying to get everyone out sometimes,
Yeah.
especially in the heat of Phoenix in the summer, sometimes hard. But there's some really cool areas around us. Some like suburban parks and things like that. There's one it's a dedicated riparian area not far from us that we like to visit, with a lot of trees and plant life and rabbits everywhere and coyotes here and there, waterfowl and whatnot. So that's really cool and fun. And then just getting away to get up on the mountains, camping now and then. For us, the kind of the closest mountains are on the Mogollon Rim. And that's always nice to get up in the cool weather up there. So go camping up there. We went last month we hiked down into this beautiful, beautiful canyon with some very, very nice, clear, cold water, and jumped in and got to the other side and found a spring over there. So we filled up our water bottles and found some mint. So we threw some mint in the water bottles with the spring water, and that's just the cool experiences that they'll take with them. And lately they've been on this kick because when they were younger, we did a lot of national parks. We would visit a lot of national parks and that, and we haven't done that as much as we would have wanted to the last few years. And so lately they're just like, hey, remember this time at Yosemite or that time at Yellowstone? And they're reliving a lot of that stuff. So that's fun to hear, and definitely gives me the motivation to get out even more, so we can keep those memories flowing, creating new ones.
Nice.
So yeah, overall we haven't been as good at getting out as we should be, but we're still doing our best to do that. And then just trying to really incorporate the nature that's around us all the time, on my daily walks. There's always new visitors that come to our pond. There's a green heron that's been hanging around lately, and the widgeons moved off early in the summer. There's always like 50 or 60 widgeons on the pond, which is a type of duck that's only here during the winter. And then they move off come, late spring, early summer. And then there's the resident mallards and Mexican ducks that are there, pretty much all the time. And so, and then we have all the birds around us having babies. We had some baby doves in a nest in our front yard, and they didn't make it, unfortunately. We found them expired on the ground below the nest, and so lots of life lessons there. And so that's one thing I've been trying to incorporate more is, we don't, as awesome as it is, as much as we try to get out and do the big in nature things, there's so much around us that we can tune into and learn about and be aware of, because if we get into that mindset that, well, I can't be in nature unless I'm in the woods, then we blind ourselves to the miracles that are all around us every day, and so been trying to really incorporate that more, I suppose.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's totally beautiful. I had an insight, having lived in the woods for so long. I noticed that actually I do a lot less walking. I do a lot less like going on walks to go, when I lived in the suburbs near my parents' place, it was like I was always, every day I'd go on a walk to the beautiful natural space nearby. It was like like breathing, I felt like that was something I needed to do, like you with your daily walks. And living in nature, it's like I actually spend more time trying to get away from nature than I do seeking wilder nature. I go like, it's so wild here already, like inside, or like
my wild nature meter is full.
And so it's like, it's been really actually quite more difficult to want to go on those walks, to want to like go like, hey, let's go on. Somebody was like, do you ever go camping? I'm like, I live camping, dude. Like, why would I go? It's like, I live camping. It's like, okay, well, I mean, we're moving into a house next, so we'll see how all that like balance changes and stuff. But
yeah, that'll be interesting.
I really noticed that, being in such a wild environment really made me less likely to go seek out that wildness because I was just in it. I
Yeah.
was just, and not necessarily appreciating it the same way I do when I'm not living in it.
Hmm.
Right. So there's, it's like interesting. And
Yeah.
I think I've learned different lessons than I thought I would on this whole journey, for sure.
So what's the thing you're most excited about moving back into a house?
Dishwasher.
Hmm.
I swear to God, washing coconut oil off of dishes is so terrible with cold water. It's terrible. It's
Right.
just terrible. I've been like beyond substandard clean for the last year and a half. I had to learn how to deal with it. I was
Yeah.
not really about it. I grew up in a very, very clean, like German household.
Hmm.
It has been such a like
Right. Right.
okay, this thing, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the dishwasher, to be totally honest.
Yeah. And
Um,
what's the thing that you think
uh,
you're gonna miss the most?
oh, I mean, waking up and like looking out the side of the van and just having all these trees around.
Hmm.
But I'm not gonna miss worrying about whether they're gonna fall on me.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's like moving my solar panel around. I'm gonna love just like plug in infinite. Okay, I gotta pay attention to my power bill and like make sure we're turning the lights off and stuff, but like not having to think about it. And the biggest piece is like the time. So the dishwasher, the reason the dishwasher is an appeal is like washing dishes with cold water is a time consuming endeavor.
Yeah.
Driving an hour to the nearest laundromat is a time consuming, like an hour there, an hour back, 3 hours at the laundromat. It's like a whole day to go do laundry,
Hmm.
right? And the time that I am going to reclaim by stepping back into society is probably something in the order of like 10 hours a week.
Wow. So what are you
Right?
gonna do with all that extra time?
Gosh. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use it towards like creating community, like
Cool.
mama up groups. We're probably gonna do like collective like soup and curry making, kraut making, that kind of stuff. So I'll have a space, I'll have a kitchen space where I actually feel like I can invite people rather than just like make
Yeah.
do and go like, okay, we're all coming over. I've got the sauna, so we'll be doing sauna all winter and probably doing that once a week, something like that. And, I mean, we'll do it every day, but we'll host like probably once a week. And um, that was a huge game changer last
Hmm.
winter, mid last winter, getting the sauna and going from like cold water I had to haul myself to like cold water I had to haul myself that I could heat up and then
Yeah,
bathe
yeah.
in. It's like that was like game changing. I know Dan's really looking forward to like hot showers and baths and stuff like that. I kind of got over it. I'm like, I've learned that like actually my body doesn't smell so bad when I don't shower, and it's actually not as important as I was raised to think it is. And I don't know. We'll see if I go back to like shower. Like I used to be really dependent on showers. It's like I'd be up at like 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. and go like, I can't fall asleep. I can't fall asleep. And I go like, okay, if I have a shower, like maybe I can fall asleep. So to be able to live without that and be like, I can put myself to sleep. Turns out
Right.
phone off at 8 p.m. and like go to bed when it gets dark out. It's a lot easier to fall asleep than to try to do it at 1 a.m. after being on my phone for 3 hours and wiring my brain with blue light.
Right.
So,
Right.
but like learning, there's lots of learning in that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you take with you into the new living situation.
Yeah.
That'll be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And we're moving to like a really outdoorsy, it's like a ski town. So it's like a very
Nice.
ski mountain town, right? So
Yeah.
it's like a very outdoorsy bike riding, skiing, hiking kind of community. So I'm sure there will be lots of people who really enjoy that. And I think it'll be a nice balance. I think it'll be a
Ah,
place where it's like nature's still all around us because we're not in like a big city. And the mountains are like still there in all their glory, even though the one on one side's got like a golf course and a ski hill on it. And you're like, oh, but also people love it, and they're there because they love nature. So
hmm.
we'll see how it all goes. We'll see how it unfolds. I do know I'm very excited to reclaim that 10 hours a week.
That's cool. That will be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm learning more and more. Like money comes and goes, but time is king. Like if you can, yeah, time is everything.
Yeah.
Um, if you can reclaim that time, that's the stuff life's made of. The wealthy don't measure their wealth in dollar amounts. They measure it in time, the time that they have to. So You can reclaim that. You're that much more wealthy.
Yeah, and I think, if there was a message for people who are living in cities where maybe like wishing they had more nature time, it's just like having like from my point of view, like having lived, having to manage all those utilities and realizing I'm still not off grid. I'm still like I'm just managing my own utilities. I'm just like
Mm,
I'm the
right.
well, getting it from town. We did do a little bit of like pumping water and like purifying our own water from streams. That is a time suck. Holy crap.
Yeah, for sure.
Pump enough water to make it clean and filtered for your whole family for like a day is like an hour's worth of work. It's a lot of
Yeah.
work. So, just sort of going like to the people who are living in cities and who are in that place where they maybe are yearning to be more off grid, just go like, look at how much time how much time you're not having to spend on those activities and really make good use of that time, right? If you're passionate about like off grid living, like use that time to work on a second business so you can afford the gear to get yourself off grid, or do the education so that you can really know what you're going to need or what that's going to look like, or save up for that land, or
Right.
use hours a week to like go get into the woods, or spend an extra hour and some a day like going on a long walk in nature, whatever's closest to you around you. It's like, yeah, it's different if it's like a cultivated lake around, with like houses all around it. It's different than like wild nature. But if you feel into it, like the earth is always there. The earth is always there.
Yes.
It's just waiting. We've just put this tiny little like cement asphalt, whatever veneer over top. Just this tiny little layer. If we stop maintaining it for any period of time, it'd be, crunked up within a decade,
Yep.
and mom reclaimed all of it.
Yep.
And so, yeah, just I think tapping into that earth resonance, tapping into that earth space is so, so important.
Yeah. It's a part of us and we're part of it.
Really.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I've been really lately, I've delved into more nature spirituality as far as Celtic druidic traditions and stuff like that. It's been a really interesting learning journey. I'm just barely started on it like the last few months, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Nice. I have to
Yeah.
pick your in some months, eh?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Beautiful. Wow, what a great conversation today, Ron. I really appreciate
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, what's
it.
recently what's a book that's really hit you hard that you've read, or have you read any?
I have been reading more. I learned how to read fiction in this last year since last
Oh,
time we
nice.
yeah. I read like several fiction books this year actually, which is like a kind of a major ding. I hadn't. I gave it up after my son, but
Mm,
he's got really into reading. So then it's like, oh well, if he's reading, like I can read too. Let me think. Probably the series is actually a series of 5 books. Is The Rowan by Anne McCaffrey. It's totally like sci-fi fiction, but it's about telepaths and teleports and telekinetics
mm.
and sort of all of these sort of psychic powers. And it's set maybe, I would say maybe like 200, 300, 500 years in the future, something like that. Sometime
Oh,
in the
wow.
future where that's become an established part of human society. Some people have talent in those areas, some people don't. They call them talents. And the capacity for those people, like how crucial those people were in extending humanity to the stars, being able to, psychically like lift spaceships up into orbit,
Whoa.
throw them from here to Jupiter, and have somebody on the other end with that kind of psychic ability to be able to catch them.
Interesting.
And yeah, so it's really, really fascinating series. It's 5 books, and it sort of follows like a family lineage through 2 or 3 generations as they sort of move through, and how impactful that particular lineage is on the development of, the proliferation of like talent throughout the galaxy, and the role that has. And then their first couple of encounters with like ET civilizations, and how they utilize those talents to engage with that. Yeah, we got into it. I had read it several times in my teenage years, and my partner's really into ET contact stuff. So he's been just like, he's bringing together citizen science stuff around the experiences people have had, and sort of gather database of knowledge to go like, actually, there's like way too many people having these experiences to say that it's not happening. It's like absolutely. And he's talking to me about some of these far out ideas and that aren't really so far out, but our programmed mind says, like, ETs are like something like from Alien and they're here to eat us, right? Like that's sort of the
ravage our planet.
Yeah, which if I can just sidestep here for a second, is projection from our own inbred colonialism.
Yes,
projected onto something that generally is a much more advanced, much more like peaceful. I like to call them space Buddhas, right? Like a much more peaceful civilization than what we are, and they've been kind of watching us since is like, give me like a little, it was like they've been watching us since the 40s, and we discovered nuclear technology, being like, are they going to figure it out? Are they going to figure out how to be like more peaceful so they can join the Galactic Federation, or are they going to like destroy themselves?
Right.
Like, we're leaning towards Galactic Federation based on a lot of the communication that's happening with people. Anyway, it got me into a whole tangent I wasn't planning on getting into there.
No worries. That's interesting.
But so he's been really like working with all these concepts, and I go, oh yeah, like ET's talking through dreams totally makes sense to me. ET, like telepathic abilities, totally makes sense to me. And I go like, why does this all make sense to me? Like, why is this just like, oh yeah, of course, like no brainer. Like I don't really have to spend time wrapping my brain around it. And I pinpointed it back to this series, this like The Rowan by Anne McCaffrey. And I go, in book 2, like they get contacted by this civilization, the Deenies. They get contacted initially first through dreams. They have several people have the same dream of these like furry small little creatures, like meeting them on top. And then they go like, oh, and then they use dreams to communicate back. And then eventually they do meet up in person, and they have these like telepathic communications with them. And you go like, oh. So my husband obviously being into like these slightly strange topics, I wanted to give my son some context and go like, okay, I had this context. It made it really easy for me to understand. Let's just get you on these books so that you don't think Dad's quite so weird. Ate it up. He listened. We got it on Audible, and he seriously listened to all 5 books. They're probably about 5 to 10 hours a piece, like 5 times. It was on repeat for like 3 months.
That's awesome.
Over again. And I go, great. Now he goes like, yeah, of course they're talking to me in my dreams. I totally get it. And I think it just really points at the capacity for fiction, science fiction, maybe it's disclosure fiction, however you want to term it. Right. Can really open our minds at a young age to advanced concepts that people who are older are really struggling with, and how important it is to have story-based learning, story versus like fact-based learning, to really open our minds to things. So
there's a reason that all cultures throughout the world had myths and legends that were passed down orally and changed as the times and the people changed for tens and hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, it's how we learn. It's how our minds grab a hold of this world and understand it on a deeper level, and how to interact with it properly. And so Absolutely. That's cool. Yeah, thanks for that.
One last question before we go for you.
Sure.
My question. So if you had, words of advice for people who are on this journey of wanting to reconnect with nature, wanting to be in more connection with that, maybe they're living in cities, what would that be advice be? Where should they get started?
Listen to, we go through it. And I think especially in this day and age, in this society, in the way that we're taught that to interact with the world means we have to talk at it, shape it, form it, create something, like basically project ourselves onto it. And I think what we fail to realize is that to truly interact with the world requires listening skills. And the hardest thing about that is, one, doing away with our own judgments long enough to truly listen. 2, actually taking the time to sit quietly and listen. And 3, to be able to pay attention, to give attention to something that doesn't seem to have any intrinsic value for us. But in fact, it really does, because whether we realize it or not, we are in relationship with all beings. How do we want that? What do we want that relationship to be like? Do we want it to be a relationship of no communication? Do we want it to be a relationship of negative communication? Or do we want it to be an open relationship of communication where we are getting information from the natural world, and also, taking the opportunity to communicate our gratitude and thanks to the natural world? And so, yeah, that would be, if I was to say anything that I think would be helpful, and help people increase their connection with the world around them, it would be to learn to listen.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, those sounds, like, just had a bumblebee come through the back of the van here. There's crickets in the back. They're just doing their thing.
Yeah.
In the winter, and then coming through like summer, it's like, oh, in the spring the birds come back.
Yes.
So quiet all winter. Where were they? The summer is so loud from nature, and so full of life and vibrant, and really getting to see that. So,
for sure.
love that. And there's the deeper listening as well.
Of course. Yeah.
Not just-
There's a if I was to recommend a quick book, I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's by Bird Baylor, and it's called, I gotta look it up now real quick. But when you said that piece on deeper listening, it reminded me of it. What's it called here? The Other Way to Listen. That's what it's called, by Bird Baylor. It's a kid's book, so it's very short, but it's fantastic. It's cool. And it's basically this young man talking to this older man, and this older man's telling him about all the things that he hears, the seed sprouting, and listening to the corn grow, and things like this, and just that deeper listening. So anyways, cool book.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I love that it's a kid's book. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Not 5 books like I suggested.
There's all kinds of learning.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Ron. I really appreciate your
You're
time
welcome.
today.
Thank you, Elena. Appreciate you.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And I'd love to touch base in like maybe another year or so. And
yeah, let's do it. Keep the conversation going.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Yeah. Have a beautiful, beautiful day.
You too. Thanks, Elena. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end.
How easily can you imagine that this experience is integrated already deeply into every cell of your being in such a way that you will begin to notice that you have already been operating from this new behavior for a while, and that it was simply a matter of noticing how much you've already been doing this. You may choose to feel that this moment is the moment that completely and utterly into your body. Or in the days and weeks ahead, getting curious about how fully and completely this experience has transformed your life, realizing that you are at complete choice to choose how you would like to integrate this information into every cell of your being.
Thank you so much for being a part of the Joygasmic Life podcast, and I am so grateful to have you here and be a part of it. If you haven't already, head over to joygasm.me to check out our Joygasmic Birth Blueprint ebook and course, which give you all of the information that you need to become a Joygasmic mama, whether you are postpartum or whether you're expecting your first baby. This course absolutely has tips and tricks for you that will help prepare you for birth, prepare you for the birth of your next child, and prepare you for peaceful and joygasmic mothering on the other side. So Absolutely. The way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything. And so by utilizing and beginning to build a practice of joygasmic alchemy, you will absolutely become a better mother and hold space, as I am and as many, many women are, for the enlightenment of the planet. We do that first by working on ourselves and then offering that support and that enlightened nature within ourselves to our families. And then from there, it ripples out. So if you haven't already checked that out, go check that out now. Again, it's joygasm.me. We've also got courses on rescuing your relationship, bulletproof mom, how to be able to handle even the most intense toddler or special needs child later on in life, as well as a multitude of new courses that are coming out. We're absolutely grateful to get to have you as a part of that. And remember, anyone who participates in the funding of the podcast absolutely gets a membership access, which allows you to access the bonus features, the ends of some of our episodes, exercises from our guests, as well as featured free content from them. So super glad to have all of you who are a part of that already here. And thank you so much for being a part of the Joygasmic Life family. If I could leave you with only one tip for how to be an orgasmic, joygasmic mama in this world, the invite would be to really step into and embody the knowledge that you are actually here for a reason, and that reason is to be an enlightened being for your family. They chose you for a reason. They chose you on this consciousness journey for a reason. And you absolutely have the tools and skills to be able to do this. If you're struggling, please reach out. I am more than happy to help people rewire what's going on in their brain, create a new story, and create a more powerful experience so you can be the kind of mama for your kids that you really have dreamed of. You absolutely deserve it, and your children absolutely deserve it. I look forward to getting to know you more, and I look forward to co-creating through the membership content. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you on the next podcast.